Welcome to the Kapital News. I am your host, Alex Karitis. Today is September 30th, 2019. Thank you so much for joining me. The last day of September already. Fall is amongst us, and it is the official end of the third quarter of the year. So, over the next several weeks, we are going to be seeing from multiple companies their earnings report, and we spoke last week. There was some guidance that has been coming out that is slanted towards the downside. Now, is this going to be realized? Is there going to be a quote-unquote earnings recession? Will this continue? Will this start up all over again? Is this just companies trying to get out ahead of the storyline to lower that hurdle in attempts to get analysts to lower their projections? Therefore, it's easier to beat analyst estimates. That's the game that gets played. The question is, do they actually jump that hurdle or don't they? We are going to be finding out over the next several weeks. Now, the title of today's podcast is Easy Money and Impeachment. Easy money because at the time of this podcast, and I'm doing this one a little bit later than normal, we have the Reserve Bank of Australia cutting interest rates once again to a fresh record low of 0.75%. Now, this was expected. It is the third rate cut in 5 months, aiming to support the employment growth and to provide greater confidence that inflation will be consistent with the medium-term target. The committee said they will continue to monitor the labor market and prepare to ease policy further if needed. Read between the lines, that means they are going to be cutting interest rates once again. Will they adopt QE? Will they adopt negative interest rates? Well, they still have a ways to go, and if they continue to cut at 25 basis points at a time, assuming that they do, then they still have a few more rate cuts in the bag to, quote-unquote, rescue their economy or stimulate growth. Now, this is no surprise to us here at the Kapital News. We have been telling you that central banks the world over will continue to cut interest rates. Now, you might have a couple one-offs here or there. Some of them might hold the line. Some of them, depending on their situation, may actually increase them. But for all intents and purposes, the major economies of the world will continue to be cutting interest rates. The United States, the ECB, the Bank of Japan, the People's Bank of China, the Reserve Bank of India, which I also believe is expected to make a decision this week. They are also expected to cut interest rates. The Reserve Bank of Australia, the Bank of Canada, the Bank of England, which, by the way, the Bank of England, they've been trying to play tough guy recently, even in the midst of all of the Brexit noise and chaos that continues, and we'll have to have many other podcasts on that in the very near future here. But despite all of that chaos surrounding Brexit, and the fact that the UK is in contraction, officially in contraction, the Bank of England was saying, well, we're not going to cut interest rates. Now, not so much. They are now starting to hint that they, too, will cut interest rates, even if there is some sort of miraculous 11th hour and 59th minute Brexit deal that is had between the Prime Minister Boris Johnson and his counterparts within the European Union. Now, don't hold your breath on that one either, although I think we're starting to see the European Union starting to get a little bit nervous because that clock is winding down, folks. We're only a month away. Halloween, trick or treat, that's the end of Brexit, supposedly. That's the hard deadline. Now, we don't know if it's a hard deadline because there was a hard deadline back at the end of March, and they're still there. So we have no idea if Halloween is going to prove to be the hard Brexit deal or no deal, but we will see what Prime Minister Boris Johnson is able to do. And he is in the midst of a political quagmire himself, sexual allegations, the fact that he isn't getting anything through Parliament, not winning any votes, not getting his prorogation, basically a suspension of Parliament that was deemed to be unlawful by the British Supreme Court. So he is striking out left and right, but nevertheless, he remains the Prime Minister, and he's continuing to march to the beat of his own drum, saying that deal or no deal, the UK leaves at the end of October, which they better, because I'm telling you, if they don't, it is quite possible that there will be riots and protests like we have seen in France with the yellow vests, And like we are seeing for what now, the 13th, 15th week of protests that are taking place in Hong Kong, and those are continuing to escalate in Hong Kong as China celebrates their 70th anniversary. So there is a lot going on. So let's get straight to the market news, excuse me, because there's a few things I want to talk about. We have the S&P gaining 15 points. We have the Dow Jones Industrial Average gaining 97. NASDAQ posted a gain of 60 points, and the Russell 2000, the small cap index, gained 3 points for the day. The Dow Jones Transports gained 0.2%, and the New York Stock Exchange was up 0.25% for the day. Oil has been pulling back on a stronger dollar. We now have WTI at $54.60 a barrel. Brent, the international metric, is at $59.80 a barrel. We have gold and silver, these precious metals, which I have been saying is in the midst of a bull market, has also gotten beat up. This is an opportunity, ladies and gentlemen. Gold is now trading at $1,465 an ounce, well below that $1,500 mark, which we said is crucial. We also have silver, now below $17, and is trading at $16.96. Now, you might say, Alex, you're crazy. You're telling me this is a bull market. We just had a huge run-up, and now we have a big pullback. So what? So what? I've told you nothing goes straight up and nothing comes straight down. You have to look at some of the fundamentals. You have to look at all of these central banks the world over that are continuing to lower interest rates, that are continuing to embark on quantitative easing, that are continuing to embark on further negative interest rates, or are getting close to embracing negative interest rates. You have countries that are now suffering major deficits. Here in the United States, we have $1 trillion deficit. This does not bode well for the value of any currency. And thus, being diversified, which I always say is just prudent as far as diversification and allocation is concerned, have a little bit of everything. So any type of pullback, as far as I'm concerned, is an opportunity to buy. And just for the sake of credibility to my audience, I do not suggest or recommend anything that I would not do myself or what I am currently doing. And on this pullback, I am going to take advantage of this pullback, and I am going to accumulate. So you can do this through acquiring these precious metals physically. You can buy the physical bullion. You can buy the coins, bars, whatever you're fancy. You can go out and buy ETFs, GLD for gold, SLV for silver. You can buy the mining stocks, however you want to play it. Be diversified. Be diversified. These types of pullbacks are a gift, okay? It is not the end of the world tomorrow. Have them as part of a broader portfolio for diversification purposes. We have the U.S. 10-year Treasury at 1.71%, and we have the VIX losing about 6 percentage points on the day and is trading at $16.24. I want to talk about the stronger dollar because that is one of the things that is making, I believe, the commodity prices start to come down, and also with it, gold and silver. But before I get to that, I just want to highlight that the Chicago PMI, the Purchasing Managers Index, contracted for the third month out of the last 4, and it is now reading 47.1. 47.1 for the month of September. I believe August was slightly above 50 at 50.4, but for the last 4 months, okay, 3 of those last 4 months have been in contraction. And this is for the Chicago area. This is basically the heart and soul of the United States. This is Middle America. So this is not good. This is not a good trend that we are witnessing here. This is on the back of the trade war, no doubt. This is on the back of the fact that this economy was slowing down before the trade war between the U.S. and China began. That trade war, like we say here all the time, because I believe it to be the case, is just exacerbating the problem. It is not the problem. It is another one. It is exacerbating the problem, okay? And this is a business cycle that is in its longest expansion in U.S. history. So it's not uncommon. It's no surprise to hear that this is long in the tooth, that it's likely that this business expansion is peaking or is about to peak. And when you peak, there's nowhere to go but down. That's what you call a recession. And we don't fear recessions here. We prepare for them. And in all honesty, they should be welcomed. Despite the fact that there will be hardships, they should be welcomed because it is a healthy process. It is a sign of a well-functioning economy to some degree in this financial world of Oz in which we find ourselves. But if we allow the market to do its thing, to liquidate debt, to allow companies to go through bankruptcy, and either to be liquidated, to say, sayonara, see you later, better luck next time, Chuck, or maybe they do restructure and come out stronger from bankruptcy proceedings. That's how this is supposed to work. Mommy and daddy government aren't supposed to come running to the rescue. Central bankers aren't supposed to come running to the rescue with fake, counterfeit money that they print out of thin air and say, here, take it and do it. And of course, they don't give that to you. They give it to the government, and they give it to big banks, and they give it to big corporations. So you got to allow the market to do its thing. You want to pretend that we are free market capitalistic in nature. Well, then you got to act like it. You can't come in with funny money. You can't come in with a whole bunch of stimulus, which is doing nothing but adding more debt to the system. And all you're doing is robbing future generations of growth, because where do you think that comes from? That needs to be paid back. So we have to allow this system to self-correct. It'll be extremely painful. I'm not here to kid you, but that's what's needed. And they know it. And that's why they continue to kick this can as far down the road as possible. Whether it's with the stock market, which is really small potatoes at the end of the day, whether it's the bond market, which is the granddaddy of them all if that baby goes, which it's likely to at some point, whether it's the foreign exchange market, which could be another tizzy, which that's another granddaddy of them. I mean, it could be in the commodity space, it could be in pensions and retirement accounts, and it's not just here in the United States, folks, it's everywhere. And we don't know what the catalyst is going to be, but it could come from everywhere, and that's why you need to stay diversified. That's why you need to stay vigilant. That's why you need to stay with the Kapital News, because we focus on all of these things, and that's just what you got to do, because you're not going to get the truth from the financial mainstream media, because they all have something to sell. All you got to do is wait 5 minutes, and you're going to have 10 commercials up there telling you to buy this, buy that, okay? The only thing I'm trying to sell here is the truth, as far as we can find it, in my book, The Cynic's Guide to Investing. All right, that's all I'm asking for, just to get the word out with this podcast, to grow this audience, a different perspective, a different take on things. We don't rush to judgment here. I mean, I'm trying to provide a breath of fresh air in this regard, because I'm not providing 5-10-minute clips with just talking points from the Democrat side or the Republican side and saying that's all you got to choose from. No, there are multiple avenues to solve these problems. So one of the things I want to talk about here before we get to the impeachment and the whistleblower, we have a stronger dollar, which has been the case for quite a while. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, the dollar's going to go down. No, it's not. No, it's not. It will, and it will go down with the other currencies, but at a lesser rate, in my opinion, compared to those other currencies, and that's what we're seeing. And this is because the United States remains the best-looking girl at the dance, because everything's relative. They all are coming down, okay? But it's on a relative basis. All right, with the Reserve Bank of Australia cutting rates, we're seeing a big pullback in the strength of the Aussie. We're seeing a pullback in the New Zealand Kiwi. We're seeing the euro really getting decimated over the past few weeks. The pound, it's been so volatile on news of Brexit. I mean, you can make a lot of money in the pound trading it back and forth if you catch the right side of it. So there's a lot of volatility in the Forex market, which is uncommon. So again, we're seeing this volatility in the Forex market, seeing this volatility in the bond market. This, to me, these are the foreshocks of something that is coming down the pike, and I don't believe it's going to be good news. Not for a second. So what does a strong dollar mean? Well, what we have seen over the past few weeks, and this was part of the decoupling theory that I've been posting out there on this podcast, is we've been seeing a stronger dollar. We've also been seeing a stronger stock market, but we also saw commodity prices increase, and we also saw gold and silver increase, along with palladium and platinum, but I mainly focused here on gold and silver. So typically when you have a stronger dollar, you have weaker commodities and you have weaker precious metals, which is what we are starting to witness. So that is the normal relationship, if you will, that we usually see. If you got a stronger dollar, you have weaker precious metals, weaker commodities. Well, only a couple weeks ago, everything was sort of going up in tandem. Stronger dollar, stronger gold, stronger silver, stronger oil. Now, some of the oil was based off of the Saudi attacks, the tensions in the Middle East, all that jazz, and some of that is starting to abate. We've had some comments from the Saudi leadership coming out and saying, okay, we need to tone things down. It's okay if Donald Trump meets with the Iranians. It'll be good for the region because if we go to war, this will collapse the global economy. He's absolutely correct. It would, because oil prices would go through the roof. It would just bring everything crashing down. So Again, cooler heads have to prevail on that, and we wish Donald Trump and all these foreign leaders the best in their pursuit, hopefully their truthful pursuit of peace and prosperity. At least peace. Let's at least start with peace, and then we can build the prosperity after that. But let's not go to war. We don't need it. So if we have a stronger dollar, this is not going to bode well for a lot of smaller emerging economies. Because if you have the stronger dollar and you have the traditional relationship of weaker commodity prices, when it comes to these emerging economies, their largest exports, their most valuable goods, are commodities. So they're going to get less revenue from their products. That's not good for them. Okay? What's also not good for a lot of these emerging economies is the fact that a lot of them have debt that is dollar denominated. So if they have a stronger dollar, it's going to take more of their home currency to buy dollars to then pay off those debts. So it's a double whammy. They're getting smacked with lower commodity prices, and it's going to take more of their domestic currency to go out and exchange for U.S. dollars to pay off that debt. So they're getting whacked on both sides. And as we've said, one of the possible catalysts to this next global recession in which we're likely to find ourselves could very well be an emerging economy. And pick one under the sun, it could be any of them. Or it could be a major corporation within any of these economies. It could also be a sovereign wealth fund that is shortfall because there's not enough revenue coming into the system. So they are not able to make good on their responsibilities and obligations. And this is another thing that we're starting to see. It's really just a continuation of more riots and protests, because we're seeing riots and protests in Egypt. We're seeing them in multiple countries. So, and this is a lot of this is tied to economics, and a lot of it is also tied to politics. But it's very difficult to disjoin both of them, because if a mother's child is starving, she ain't going to be happy, and neither is his daddy, okay? So they're going to go out and they're going to protest, and they're going to say something's wrong here. Inequality's wrong. Something needs to be fixed. Something needs to be settled. We've said this for months here on this podcast, that inequality will breed political strife, and that is what we are witnessing. It's just a matter of time before those chickens come home to roost here in the United States. We are in the midst of the 2020 presidential election. You're going to have the mainstream Democrats coming out and promising, which they already are, free stuff, and complaining about the income inequality, which, according to the Census Department, a recent report out of the Census Department, which is under the leadership of Donald J. Trump, has come out and said, look, income inequality is the worst it has been since we have been keeping records, and I believe that goes back to the early 60s, mid-60s, something like that. And if you really go back even further, and if you believe Ray Dalio, the world's largest hedge fund manager, which I happen to agree with on this, and we've stated this on previous podcasts several times, he thinks it goes back to the 1930s, which is even worse. So to say that this is the best economy in U.S. history is a bunch of bogus, okay? But we know this. We know this, but that's the mantra. That's what Donald Trump and his administration are going to continue to peddle. Another thing that sort of gave the markets an impetus to this is last week on Friday, we said there was some news coming out that was being floated out there that the United States might start to delist Chinese companies. Oh, well, we can't have that. That's no good. You know, this type of thing, and the market sold off because, well, clearly that must be an escalation in this trade war. Now, that was on Friday. Oh, this is Monday, and the markets are open. What do you think happened? Tick-tock, tick-tock. What do you think happened? Well, of course, Peter Navarro, Donald Trump's economic genius, I say this sarcastically, I want this man fired, comes out and says, no, that was fake news. We never meant to do that. No, that was made up. Nobody said that here in the White House. I don't believe that for a second. Why this administration has to leak these things out, why they got to put these statements out there, why they have to negotiate in public is beyond me, except for the fact that they want to continue to manipulate markets. Plain and simple. Because if they knew they were going to come out and make that statement last Friday, and they were in the options market, and they knew that was going to come and have that big sell-off, boom, somebody could have made a lot of money. Likewise today, if you know you're coming out to say that was fake news, and you anticipate markets are going to rally, you can make money on the long side of things, and boom, you can make a lot of money. Why isn't that investigated? Instead, we got to go down all these rabbit holes with the Russians and the Ukrainians. Market manipulation is right in front of your face on a daily basis. Nobody calls them out on it. So that's that. Let's see, what do we got today here with the impeachment? Because over the past few days, we have been taking the time here on this podcast If you're new to the podcast or haven't caught up recently, the past several days I have taken the time to read either in part or in its entirety the transcript from the White House regarding the phone call between President Trump and President Zelensky of the Ukraine, the whistleblower's formal complaint, and the memo from the Office of Inspector General of the Intelligence Community. So I think those were pretty thorough podcasts as of late. I do this on purpose to read them in their entirety because, again, I don't want to give you snippets here and there of what I think. I want to give you the facts. I want you to think for yourself and draw your own conclusions. I'm not here to say, well, he's guilty, he's innocent, we got to do this, we got to do that. If you're watching CNN, MSNBC, they're basically already getting the gallows poles out. They're ready to hang this guy, which they have been for the past 3 years. The Russia collusion conspiracy story didn't stick. Now they're going after him with Ukraine and asking for a favor. Okay? And they're going to be selective in what they talk about in their reports. Although, I do have to say, for the most part, they have been consistent and they have been somewhat thorough. However, I have a problem with a lot of the argument that is made on MSNBC and CNN. When it comes to Fox, I have some issues because all they're doing is trying to deflect for the president. This mainly being the commentators, Sean Hannity and the like, basically coming out and saying, no, Donald Trump is completely innocent of all of this. It's the Bidens who are guilty. So, again, you're getting siloed in. I don't like doing that here. I like the facts to come out, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to wait for this process to unravel, okay, and just to play out. And it could unravel, and it could be bad for the Democrats, or it could be bad for Donald Trump, or it could be bad for all of them. I'm not here to say that Donald Trump's going to win this. I'm not here to say the Democrats are going to win this. The truth better win. Justice better win, and I don't care who goes down, because this ain't good for the country. This impeachment process is serious business. Just because you're a Democrat and an anti-Trumper, this is not good for the republic and the health of this country. Not for a second. This is serious business. And this isn't something to play with either if you're a Republican to say, well, Donald Trump's completely innocent. Everybody asked for favors. This is Joe Biden. No, all right, Joe Biden asked for a favor too. So, I mean, are they both guilty or are they both innocent? So we got to get off of this. We got to be as focused as possible on the truth and on justice, because we most definitely have a two-tier justice system in this country. So a couple things I want to note about the whistleblower and just some updates that are going to be making their way through this week. We have the former ambassador to Ukraine from the United States, Ambassador Yovanovitch. She is set to testify this week. I believe that will be open testimony. Ambassador Volker, Kurt Volker, the special envoy to the Ukraine, is set to testify this week as well. I believe his will be private. Or he is being deposed this week. And, of course, this is the ambassador who resigned last Friday. The whistleblower's formal complaint was released to the public on Thursday of last week. This ambassador, the special envoy to Ukraine, Volker, resigned. And now he is set to testify before Congress or to be deposed. Okay? We also have the IG of the intelligence community, Michael Atkinson, who was responsible for the memo that we read on a previous podcast, and stated that given a preliminary review by his office, that despite the fact that the whistleblower had an indicia or an indication of political bias, that their preliminary review showed that this whistleblower appeared to be credible, and that's why this got escalated to Congress and has thus been released to the public. He is set, Michael Atkinson, the Inspector General of the Intelligence Community, Michael Atkinson. He is set to testify before Congress, and I believe that, too, is behind closed doors later this week. So there's a lot of names coming out. Again, in that whistleblower complaint, that whistleblower did name some names, okay? A lot of times, otherwise, it was just senior U.S. officials here, White House officials there. But clearly somebody had to have been interviewed, or there was other information that this whistleblower gave to the Inspector General that made him conclude, along with his office, that this was an urgent matter, and it does appear credible. Now, one of the things that is making its way through the debates on Fox News, on CNN, MSNBC, all of them, is this argument about hearsay. Okay? Because throughout the entirety of the whistleblower's formal complaint, he or she notes several times throughout that they do not have first-hand knowledge of this information. All right? They do not have firsthand information, firsthand knowledge of this information against Donald Trump and company. All right? This is known. Nevertheless, again, the IG states that it is a credible complaint. All right? And that needs to be stressed, because you're going to hear what you want to hear if you're just listening to Fox News or if you're just listening to CNN. You got to get that through your head. Despite all of this noise, the political bias, the hearsay, still credible from the Office of Inspector General, and Michael Atkinson was appointed by Donald J. Trump. So this would have to be one huge conspiracy. All right? So you got to keep that in the back of your mind too. All right? Now, one of the other things that is involving this argument with hearsay is you have people within the Trump administration and his defenders coming out and saying, well, just a week before, or very soon, very, very recently, the Inspector General changed a rule that said you no longer have to be a first-hand witness to whatever you were blowing the whistle on. I've done a little bit of research on this, and from what I can tell, this argument is not true. There was a change in some of the documents. Okay, now, for those of you who may be familiar with some government documents, it's no surprise that there can be contradictions within a government document. It might say one thing at the top, and by the time you get to the bottom, it completely contradicts itself. Well, that appeared to be the case with some of these documents, and that is why there was a change to these documents, but it was to alleviate some of these contradictions. You are allowed to blow the whistle if you have firsthand knowledge, or if you don't have firsthand knowledge. That's from what I was able to find, and I believe that to be the case because I'm going to tell you why. Because to me, it makes sense. Let's just take a deep breath and take a step back from this. If you're going to come out and be a whistleblower, this is not small potatoes. This is not kiss your wife goodbye in the morning and say, "We'll see you later, honey. I'll be back later. Don't forget, I'm going to become a whistleblower today," and then just leave. No, that's not how this works. This is not small potatoes. If you're going to come out and be a whistleblower, especially against the U.S. government, especially against the most powerful man in the world, the President of the United States, that's a major life decision. This is not putting your tennis shoes on in the morning. This is a life's decision. This is, I'm going to get married, I'm going to have kids, I'm going back to school, I'm going to take a job in another state, in another country. This is a big deal, people. This is not, oh, I cannot stand Donald Trump and I just have to blow the whistle on. That does not rise to this. And if it did, this individual would be insane. So now you got another problem, because if somebody just did this because they have such animus against this president, that's a big problem, because this individual should not be in the White House next to the President of the United States. We already know there's a lot of people in this country who don't think that Donald Trump is mentally fit to be the president. Well, that's par for the course. It makes no difference. Half of the country is always going to think that the president isn't fit in one form or another. But that's a serious thing to bring up, okay? Being a whistleblower is a major life decision, all right? You would have to think that this individual had some sort of crisis of conscience where they had to come out and say, we got to blow the whistle on this. Even though I am not a first-hand witness to this, from what I'm hearing from multiple sources within the White House, I feel obligated or compelled to come forward through these legal channels. All right? So, let's look at it like this. In this instance, we have people who have firsthand knowledge of what took place on this phone call. Okay? We know this. We also know, according to the whistleblower's complaint, that this person did not. The whistleblower did not have firsthand knowledge. But the knowledge that they received from other people who have firsthand knowledge startled this whistleblower. They said, "Oh, are you serious? This is what this is? I can't have this. I got to blow the whistle." Now, I'm sure this was an in-depth process, going through their minds for days, who knows how long. Okay, again, a serious life decision that you're going to make, because the government has unlimited resources, and if you understand the history of the U.S. government going after whistleblowers, you understand why this is such a major decision. Because they're going to bankrupt you, or they're going to attempt to bankrupt you. And if you are wrong when you make these claims, these urgent matters, okay, they will destroy your career. If they can, they will lock you up and throw away the key. They will bankrupt you. They will ruin your life. They will make sure you don't get a job somewhere. All right? Just look it up. So to say that this person just doesn't like Donald Trump and they want to blow the whistle, I'm not buying it. Because that would have to be the biggest conspiracy ever concocted. And that happens to be one of the arguments, basically, that is being made by Donald Trump, his personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, and some of his defenders. Now, if you want to believe that, you can. The probability of that being the case, we're going to have to wait and see. I'm not saying it's an impossibility, but if you're going to assign a probability to it, I'd say it's pretty low. But we will see. The facts will win out. And if that happens to be the truth, I will be the first one to say it, because that's what this podcast is about. But before we get to that truth, it is going to take a long time, regardless of what happens to be the truth when all of this unfolds. Okay, so we got to be patient with all of this. So here's the thing again with this whistleblower and being a secondhand source, if you will, to this information. Imagine you're this whistleblower, all right? You do not have firsthand knowledge. But somebody comes to you and you say, well, I know this person's credible. And then I heard it from somebody else who I also believe to be credible. And I heard it from somebody else and somebody else. And they're all saying basically the same thing. Now, from what the argument is from Trump, his White House, and some of his defenders, well, this is all hearsay. You can't file this complaint. No. It's a major decision. What happens if person A, who has firsthand knowledge of this, has a wife, has kids, has a pension that he's counting on, he's worked his entire life, and he's come across this information that the president has said something that might be questionable. It might be questionable. Now, this person might have a crisis of conscience, right? Or they might say, well, you know what, it's not good, but I'm not going to rat him out because I have a wife, I have kids, I have a life I'd like to maintain, I have a retirement account, and I don't want the government coming down on me and taking it all away. Okay? Now that's serious. That's realistic. So what is the whistleblower who doesn't have firsthand knowledge supposed to do? Are they supposed to convince all of these people who do have firsthand knowledge that, hey, this is so bad you have to put your life through everything. You got to put your life on hold, you got to stop the presses, and you got to file a formal complaint? That's a big deal. So to say that you cannot be a first-hand source, to me, doesn't hold water. It's not good enough. Would it be better, perhaps, if this individual did have first-hand knowledge? Absolutely. I don't disagree with that for a second. But the only way that you can file a complaint? No, I'm not buying that at all. Because this is a serious matter, and people aren't going to take this. People are going to take this seriously, and those are real-life consequences that these people are going to have to deal with. You spend a lifetime, and you just happen to be in a room where somebody says something that's questionable, and you're supposed to throw your whole life away? You're supposed to throw your pension away? That's a big decision. People aren't going to make that lightly. So whoever's doing this has put a lot of thought into this decision and is now going to have to deal with the consequences, rightly or wrongly. Now, the other thing that sort of has me concerned is the language that Donald Trump is using surrounding this whistleblower. What he said sort of behind closed doors, but nevertheless was taped by, I believe, a cell phone or whatever, and where he said, look, I want to know who this whistleblower is because look what happened. If this person's a spy, what's going on here? And you know what we used to do to spies back in the old days, basically implying that when spies were caught back in the old days, they were executed. So this is not the type of rhetoric that is helping the president's cause. Somebody has to sit this man down and say, shut it. You are not helping yourself with this at all. And from some of the other reports that I'm coming across, people are finally in the White House sitting Donald Trump down and saying, look, you have to understand this is serious business now. This is not just the Mueller probe. This is a formal impeachment inquiry. You have to settle down. Now, will he listen? I don't know. This is Donald Trump. Everybody says Donald Trump is his own man, does what he wants. But let me tell you, folks, this is the heart and soul of this republic. This was an election. So for this to be undone is serious business. My analysis on that phone call transcript does not rise to an impeachable offense in my opinion. Now, does everything else that has come out since, does that need to be investigated? Yes, it does. Because despite the fact that the whistleblower does not have firsthand knowledge, what he states in his formal complaint jives with what came out in the transcript that was provided from the White House itself. The fact that it mentioned CrowdStrike, that U.S. cybersecurity firm that looked into the DNC servers, that it mentioned Rudy Giuliani multiple times, the Bidens multiple times. So whoever had that firsthand knowledge related accurately to this whistleblower or to this individual who happened to become the whistleblower. All right? Now, there's other things that are in that complaint. Time will tell if those things also unfold to be true. There's a lot hanging on this. Now, some other news that came out today here is Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was reportedly, and I'm stressing this reportedly, this has not yet been confirmed to my knowledge, and I am shaky to say for a fact that this is true, but reportedly, Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State, was also on this phone call on July 25th between Donald Trump and President Zelensky of the Ukraine. Okay? Now, why is this news? Because from what you hear, this is not typical that the Secretary of State would be on all of these phone calls, although this is just one phone call. But he would typically be brought up to speed on some of the transcripts, on some of the notes from the call. But he was asked in some other interviews whether or not he was involved or aware of some of this, and he sort of deflected. So this is going to come to light. Now, again, reportedly. I'm not saying for a fact that Mike Pompeo was there, but this is being reported out there in the news. And lastly, we have Rudy Giuliani, the personal attorney for Donald J. Trump. He is continuing to claim that he has damning evidence against the Bidens. Now, Giuliani, again, he's the man in the middle of all of this, which I'm still somewhat struggling with in his role in all of this and how this is going to unfold. Because he wants to claim that he has sworn affidavits from witnesses in Ukraine that are testifying against some of the narrative that has been thrown out there, that a lot of the investigation and a lot of the corruption has been debunked surrounding the Bidens. So Mayor Giuliani is saying, no, this has not been debunked. I have sworn affidavits from witnesses in Ukraine that say otherwise. Now, Mayor Rudy Giuliani, the personal attorney for Donald J. Trump, is acting as the personal attorney of Donald J. Trump. He is trying to protect the president. So in any defense, that attorney is going to throw out a different theory that attempts to protect and defend his client being the president of the United States. It can be as outlandish as he wants it to be. It appears from a lot of his rhetoric that that's what it is. Now, this needs to be investigated. This needs to be hashed out as well, as far as I'm concerned, because nobody's above the law. And again, one of the things that gets me going with the left on MSNBC and CNN in particular is this argument that Joe Biden is somehow above the law because he's a political contender of Donald J. Trump. Who cares? Who cares? That doesn't mean he's above the law. The problem with all of this, in my opinion, and I've stated this multiple times before, is Donald Trump's timing of all of this with the phone call with President Zelensky of the Ukraine. Why did he wait 3 years to have a phone call with the Ukrainians about an election interference that took place in 2016? And mention in that phone call, do me a favor and look into Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden. If Donald Trump had stated this to the previous Ukrainian administration in 2017 when he came in, or 2018 when he came in, then he could say, hey, look, President Zelensky, I'm just continuing the conversation I had with the previous administration, and I just want to bring you up to speed that these were the things I was looking into. If that happened, then Donald Trump is being consistent that he is looking into a corruption matter that had to deal with U.S. elections. Okay? But the fact that we don't know if that was true or not, that he did have a previous conversation with the previous administration, this looks suspect. The timing looks suspect because Joe Biden is his political contender. He is one of them. So now it looks political. Now it looks like he may be abusing his office. But that does not mean that he is. Right? It doesn't. Because Joe Biden is not above the law. Now the other thing that I'm going to leave you off with here is we've had, over the weekend with all the Sunday morning shows and all that stuff, you had a former Homeland Security advisor. His name is eluding me right now, but he was on multiple programs, I do believe, stating that the president was well aware that this story surrounding Ukraine and the Bidens has been debunked. That this is not true, that they were not found guilty or they were not involved in any type of corruption dealing. Okay, now this was somebody who was working for the Trump White House. This was somebody, I believe, that Donald Trump had appointed or who was within the Trump White House. Now, maybe he has an agenda. Again, I don't know, but that would be, again, following that script of a conspiracy against Donald J. Trump. So if you choose to believe that, that's on you. But, again, time will tell all. We covered a lot of information here. Easy money and impeachment. A lot more to come. Stay tuned. Stay diversified. Stay vigilant and stay with the Kapital News. Thank you so much for joining me today, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a pleasure having you as always. Please like, share, subscribe, and get the word out, and leave your comments. We do love hearing from you. This is the Kapital News. I am Alex Karitis. Godspeed.